Right, so how did the Kia Niro perform on its first road trip? Recently, I took it to visit my school on one of the last days I was going to be there as I retired. I think everybody knows I've retired at this stage. And I took it on a little road trip, 78-mile round trip. So I kind of recorded my figures percentage wise and also miles per kilowatt hour, etc., and the range. Um, from start point to first waypoint, which was the school itself, starting from there and back home again, and seeing what kind of percentage I got on the kind of driving. Now, that involved quite a bit of motorway driving as well. And I have a video out which actually sees me discussing my driving strategy and whatever during the actual journey. That's a different video. This one's more about the actual stats and the figures for the journey itself. My start percentage on the battery was 77%, and the journey was starting about 10 past 10 in the morning to arrive in school, which was 39 mile away. And the journey was going to take about 55 minutes to an hour, depending on what the traffic was like. So, this is kind of a record of the actual journey figures or the miles per kilowatt hour, etc. Okay, so we're starting with 77% of battery. My range for that 77% is 186 miles, and we're in zero on the tripometer and whatever. So that's the range I'm working with. I didn't have any real fear about the range because at 186 miles and my round trip, I'd worked out on Google Maps, was going to be round about 79, 80 miles in total, possibly 82 if I had to take a few diversions. But it actually ended up as a pretty straightforward run, and the mileage came in at round about just over 78 miles for the round trip. So I'm starting off with a range of 186 miles. Okay, so the miles come in at 39.4, and I averaged 4.4 kilowatt miles per kilowatt hour, which was a very good average, and particularly with the motorway element in it. And I had 64% of battery left. Um, Now, if you work out that I started off with 186, that was the battery regeneration, etc., was very good there. So I've actually I've done more miles than I've used in my range. So that would suggest the car is running very well. And the driving mode for the whole of the journey was quite good for that part of the journey. So pleased with that. Arrived at school, 170 miles still left on the range, so I felt very confident at that stage. It kind of was the first longer trip that I'd taken. It took a week or so to familiarise myself with the different bits that were in the car and how best to use the regen and stuff like that. I did find on the motorway on the way down, I didn't use the cruise control at all, so I didn't. And I'll talk about that. And I talked about that actually during the journey video. So, that's worth a watch too because it's more in depth about the actual nuts and bolts of the driving technique, etc. Right. So at the end of the actual trip, my battery reading was 51%. The miles were the interesting bit because the miles actually read 132. Now I'd done 78.8. So I'd actually used a range in my car on the gasometer or whatever you want to call it, or the rangeometer of 54 miles, and it actually covered 78.8. And I was averaging 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour. So I was very pleased with that. It gave me a lot of confidence in the car. It was my first particularly long journey. So overall, I would be saying that the car performed very well. I'm quite happy with the way I'm coping with driving it as a new EV. As I say, watch the video on the actual road trip because it goes in more in depth about the actual driving technique, etc., during the journey. But at this stage, I would look at that at 51% and left is fine. I had loads left in the battery, loads of range, 132 miles. As I say, I've used 54 miles of actual range, and I did cover 78.8 miles. And there's the rating for the actual driving style. Um, which would be I had an economical rating of 98% of the journey was done in an economical way and 2% in a normal way. None went into the dynamic driving style at all. So that would prove that if you drive this car sensibly, it'll give you a lot of range. So it will. I'll talk more about charging and different stuff like that. I'm going to do individual videos on those things as we go. But what I would say at this stage is the Kia Niro EV performed admirably, and I'm very happy with my purchase. And I'm sure I'll produce more on road trips and stuff. The actual, as I say, I'm directing you to the road trip video in particular because it gives a lot of in-depth stuff on the actual driving style and the best way to get the best out of the car, particularly on the motorway. Now, that'll obviously improve as I gain more experience, but for a first go, I was extremely pleased with how the car performed and also the range signals that I got off it.